Was there a moment that you always look back to from Black Hawk Down and you said to yourself in that moment, I am not making it out? Like, I will not survive today because of this one thing.
It was kind of the entire day, the entire night. There was a portion of time, I think, in the middle of the night where things kind of calmed down and it wasn't as chaotic, and we were just kind of sitting waiting for guys in helicopters to get extricated and things like that. And it wasn't until the sun started to kind of peak back up where you're like, oh, this is going to turn back on again. But for the initial assault and two or three times that I went out into the city, it was just, I don't think any of us are going to make it out alive. And so every time we would kind of get back and be secure and all right, get more ammo, and we're going back out to try and find this other crash site. And I didn't think that it was happening for any of us.
And
Uh, I
sorry, go
kind of
ahead.
I kind of came to peace. I was just telling my son about this actually the other day, but I kind of came to peace with, okay, if I get hit in the chest, like I've got a plate carrier, hopefully that stops it. If I get hit in the arms or the legs, chances are I'll live. And if I get hit anywhere else, it's probably going to be pretty quick and traumatic and over. So I hope that I remember thinking specifically in the middle of the afternoon, I hope that I can just like look at the blue sky and have something peaceful to look at, not this shithole, what I'm looking at in front of me. I hope that's not my last moments. And that kind of gave me a little bit of peace.
So Outkick, we got a younger audience. A lot of people watching this weren't even alive in 93. I was barely alive in 93. Can you kind of explain from your estimate, what are the numbers situation here? Roughly, how many Americans are out fighting, and what size, if you had to estimate, force are you guys facing?
Uh, so I think, if you think about it in terms of we're in a very large urban metropolitan type of area, uh, a significant number of people, crowds and crowds, swarms of people on some of the operations that we did prior to October 3rd and 4th. We were having to use the helicopters to come in and kind of dust off the crowds to get people away from us because there were that many. It's like being downtown in a major city. And not necessarily the infrastructure and buildings and things like that weren't necessarily the same, but it was very much a downtown type of thing. I know that we killed about 2,000 Somalis, militiamen and fighters, and there were about 120 of us. So, if you look at those numbers, the majority of the casualties that we sustained on our end were out driving around looking for the crash site, people going to try and find the crash site. How do we do that? You asked the question about hindsight and looking back, and I realize now how, it was a different military. There was no Instagram with like seeing dudes with fortitude nods and tricked out guns and all that stuff. Like there was nothing like that. We didn't have radios and just a means to communicate internally, so it was a totally different army. But when I look at how underprepared we were in that, what was our contingency if the exact thing that happened? Do we drive around looking for the crash site? Do we want to bring in, something else? Like, what's the contingency for that stuff? And if anything, I look back and I go, man, we were underprepared. I didn't know, as an example, is it okay when women or unarmed people come out into the street to point out locations? Like, is it okay to shoot them? Is it not okay to shoot them? So even that, you're putting questions into people's minds so that they can't just respond when they're in a situation. You have all these other things that are going on in your brain trying to figure out if you're doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. There's no way to tell people, hey, this is what we're doing. It just, you kind of see things and the volume of fire. We didn't have hearing protection, like everybody has nowadays. So it's just a completely different battle. But if anything, I look back and I go, we were way underprepared.
I know that you recently posted, I think on the anniversary, you were wearing a wristband. You said, I think the Instagram caption on your Instagram story was representing my buddy Pilla. So th that could be just off, but it was something along those lines. And I know the last time we spoke, you talked
Hmm.
about how watching your friends get killed. Oh, there it is. There it is. Right there. You talked about how watching your friends getting killed changed your mentality, and you just got so unbelievably angry. I recently reshared that social clip, and I'm wondering if you could walk us through, if you could walk the Outkick audience through on that day, once people started getting killed in action, how quickly did that change the calculus, the mindset, and the dynamics for you with what you were doing?
It was at first it was very chaotic and just not understanding what was happening. We didn't even make it to the target building, so we were already being significantly engaged. Probably miles away from where we were supposed to ultimately end up. I didn't even understand that. We rolled out the gate and it was kind of like, we're going here, these guys are going here, literally. Okay, cool. Well, the target building should be behind us. And the first time I dismounted, I'm looking around and I guess this is the target building. And, I'm focused out this way to look for bad guys. And, was already engaging people and things along those lines. So I didn't really understand that we were being shot at when it first started happening. We weren't hearing the report of the weapon. We were hearing the crack of the bullet. And when you're like, we didn't have training environments back then that put us in situations where you could hear that. You didn't go downrange if other dudes were shooting. Everybody waited, stood on line, marched down to their target, things like that. So I didn't even understand that the crack of the bullet as it's going hypersonic or subsonic past, like I don't realize what's happening. Um, and then as soon as I started to piece together, like, oh, we're getting people hurt here and somebody was killed, then it was kind of like, all right, you're gonna pay. And it turned into a very, not that it wasn't already violent situation, but it definitely upped the escalation of violence and, probably what was required just so that we all didn't die.
That every time I watch that clip, or like you just said it, it's stunning to me, especially given the fact that, again, you are way younger than I am currently in such a situation. Here's kind of an interesting one, and it's if you could, we've seen a lot of World War II veterans go back to Germany. We've seen Vietnam veterans go back to Vietnam. If you could go back to Somalia, it's a little different because Somalia is still insanely dangerous. But would you go back to Somalia and visit the area that happened in, or is that something you have no interest in?
Um, I don't think that it's a question of no interest. It's more like, what's it going to do for me? And it's not going to bring me peace. It's not like I go, oh, if anything, maybe I would even be more disappointed that the place is still a gigantic shithole and isn't any better than what it was in 1993. So, I don't, I felt like at the time that not a single one of my buddies was worth what we were doing there. I'm glad that I went. I'm glad that I had that as a part of, my military career. It's a part of who I am today. It's not who I am today,
Right.
but I'm glad that I experienced it. I think everybody that went there would say that they were glad that they got to experience that, especially when the military was in a time of no war. So it was the only thing going for, another 7, 8 years. No other conflict, maybe a little bit of stuff in Bosnia, but that's really about it. So I don't know. I don't think that going back there is going to do anything for me. It's not going to reconcile. Like, I don't go to bed at night, hating the Somali people
Right.
or anything like that. There were AQ Al Qaeda militia guys that were there, and that was the majority of who we were battling. And then you have a population that's already, whipped into a frenzy and upset about their life situation and everything else that kind of started to follow suit. And everybody and their brother that had an AK is sticking it out the window, shooting at you as you go by, and that type of thing. So I don't have any animosity towards anybody. It's not going to heal me or fix something inside me. I think I'm pretty good. And, I don't really see the point.